Welcome to this episode of The People Dividend. I'm your host, Mike Horne, and I am absolutely delighted to have in our virtual studio today my colleague, friend, teacher, mentor,
Mm.
all-around superhero, John Bennett. And when John isn't fulfilling any of those roles, he does some stuff that we do here on the mortal plane, which is he is a professor of business and behavioral science at the McColl School of Business, Queen's University of Charlotte, where he holds the Wayland Cato Chair of Leadership. And in addition to his teaching, I know John as an executive coach, a frequent speaker and presenter at academic, professional, and client conferences and workshop. Um, in some ways, John and I are generational peers, I think. I'm not sure. I
Yeah.
only read this because John has about 30 years of challenging and successful experience creating, leading, and being part of change in various industries. He was a chief executive officer of an American Red Cross Biomedical Services Division, where he led pharmaceutical manufacturing and distribution operations in the development and delivery of essential human services. He's worked on mergers, turnarounds, new product development, marketing, tech system designs, integrations. He was an SVP and Talent Solutions Director for Lee Hecht Harrison, and was CEO of the Foundation for Coaching. And as an executive coaching consultant, John's helped individuals, teams, organizations across industries, across sectors, and he is author of a book called Coaching for Change. But today we're here to talk about, and I am going to let John say a few words about himself. He just has this illustrious background that denies a short introduction. Um, we're going to be talking today about John's new book, which just came out in September 2024, right at the beginning of the month in September, and it's called The Manager's Guide to Coaching for Change. Um, so, John, why don't you say a few words about yourself?
Well, I don't know what else I could say, Mike. You've covered quite a territory there, and it's wonderful to be with you. And I do consider you to be a colleague, a friend, and a mentor for me as well. I think I've always admired your progression and your work, and been inspired by that. And we do come from similar roots in many ways. Our backgrounds in some places are the same, and some of our teachers have been the same along the way. And I'm excited about this new book and the possibilities of really making a big difference in the lives of team members throughout many organizations by improving the effectiveness of their people leaders, managers, to be able to use a coaching approach in dealing with such a key asset as people. So.
Yeah, I'd like to unpack that some more and to understand more of that and to understand what led you to write this book. And just two observations in that regard. One, a statement, and then the other, the observation. I'll be very quick with the statement. I know about the excitement of launching a book. I'm going to have my next book out very soon, also known as the People Dividend, unlocking leadership strategies for unlocking potential. So we're just in the final throes of all of that in terms of post-production and in terms of production. So I know how exciting a launch is and how great it is an opportunity to talk about and to give presence to your ideas. But as I read this great book, The Manager's Guide to Coaching for Change, which you're able to find on Amazon for sure. It was sprinkled with, John mentioned that we had teachers in common. It's sprinkled with Charlie Seashoreisms. And there are a number of chapters that, or maybe every chapter opens with a quote, I think, and several open with these statements from uh, Charlie Seashore. I learned them a little bit differently, but they were so similar. So, for example, this observation on, feedback says more about the giver than it does the receiver. I think you heard it in a much more diplomatic way and expressed it. But all of that aside, I love seeing all of those references to our dear departed teacher, Charlie Seashore. And what led you to write this book, John?
Yeah. Well, when Mary Wayne Bush and I wrote Coaching for Change, and that was published in 2014, I had in the back of my mind that there was another book to be written, and it was really focused on how to help managers, leaders, people who are interacting with other people to apply coaching skills, because so much has been written about how coaches need to coach, professional coaches. And I think we've seen over the last few years, and I've been doing this work for 25 years. And one of the things I've noticed is that we spend a lot of time teaching coaches to coach, but we don't really focus on how managers can use coaching skills. And so that gap for me was a driver for this. And so as I've not only managed and led people and teams, I've also done a lot of work in organizations with highly dysfunctional leaders. And I sometimes jokingly say that dysfunctionality is job security. And what I mean by that is that there's so many opportunities to help leaders to improve. So as we think about what's going on in the workplace these days, I've been tracking trends over the last few years of workplace and workforce. And one of the challenges is that people leaders are being drawn into so many things that they don't have time to pay attention to the people. They're so focused on the task, and the reduction of resources in many organizations makes it almost impossible for them to have meaningful conversations with their team members to help them grow and develop. Now, if you put that in perspective, most organizations that I've interacted with will tell me that their operating budgets are somewhere between 40 to 60 or even 70% focused on people. Our single largest line item in an operating budget of most organizations is their human resource. And we have all kinds of preventive maintenance and development programs and replacement programs and all kinds of things for equipment, but we don't do it for people. And so I always challenge leaders to say, let's put a comparable amount of resource and effort into helping people be their very best. And so this book came out of the call for that, the need for that. And it's certainly a passion of mine to help leaders to be effective. And I think one of the ways we can do that is by having them adopt a coaching approach to their day-to-day interactions with colleagues as peers, but also with the people that report to them.
As I read John Bennett, The Manager's Guide to Coaching for Change, in addition to the earlier observations I made, one of the issues, themes, ideas, presentation formats that captured me was what a rich resource this book is, The Manager's Guide to Coaching for Change. Because I thought, well, this could be a textbook. This could be a resource for coaches, so that coaches can have all of this at their disposal. Certainly a resource for managers, certainly a resource for people and culture leaders, HR professionals, to help spur these kinds of conversations, and for others. So I saw that, across in terms of the presentation of the book. Did you intend to any or all of that?
Yeah, well, it is intentional. And you know from writing books yourself that you've got to get clear about who you're writing for and who you're writing to. And I think of it as who's the persona that I'm really speaking to. And this book, yes, is appropriate for all of those. But again, the primary focus for this book was on people leaders. and in helping them, because the vocabulary that's in here, I tried my best to move away. There's some cases where I use the word client, for example, but I think that applies to team members. But for the most part, the language is that way. It also it was written with the intent of being very practical. And so, for example, I included in the book some interviews with people leaders who I
I
know
love that.
their
I
coaching
love
approach.
those usually end of chapter interviews,
Yeah,
right? Or
yeah,
yes, yes, I love that.
yeah. There's six of those, and they're really the stories of how individuals are using a coaching approach in their day-to-day interactions. I also tried to give some very clear examples of conversations that can be examples for exemplars, if you will, of how you can use a coaching mindset, which we ought to talk about a little bit. And what's that? How is that? And what's that different from what many managers speak about and act? But I also included in there a six-step coaching approach, a way that you can engage in a conversation. I call it, it's the GPS of a coaching conversation.
Yes.
It's the way when I teach coaching, I tell people you should always know where you are, because then you know where you're going. And also included in the book are six coaching skills, basic, fundamental human interaction skills applied to coaching. And a piece that I also was really excited about doing is I've become familiar over the last 10 or 12 years with Roger Schwartz's work.
Oh
He
yeah.
wrote a book called Mutual. It's actually about mutual learning. The title of the book is Smart Leaders, Smarter Teams. And one of the things that Roger does in there is that he outlines some behaviors that leaders can exhibit. And one of the things I did was to map that to coaching, because I think that is a good framework. And if we could engage people in ways that demonstrate those 8 behaviors, then it will advance as a foundation for them, a way of being more effective as a coach. And
Well, I think since you raised it, I mean, there's a bit of the chicken and egg question here, the conundrum, the challenge of can managers be coaches?
mm,
And is that um, and I've often used to help my audiences understand that difference is to think about the Olympics,
mhm.
which weren't, in the not too distant past, the summer 2024 Olympics, and to think about the roles of coaches and how they're distinguishable from, the person who's holding up the scorecard,
Right.
1 to 10, and when is the manager not a judge? When can he or she or they engage in coaching? And um, what say you, John?
Well, what I would suggest is that effective leaders are coaches. And it's one of the skill sets and mindsets and roles that they play. And unfortunately, we have taught leaders for many years that, in spite of a notion that human beings have brains and have the capacity of making wise decisions, that they often need to be told what to do. And what I would suggest is, if you're hiring people who are skilled and capable, who want to learn and grow, who want to advance, who are paying attention to what's important to the organization, that the role, and hopefully that's what you're hiring, is that the role of a manager is not to control, because that's the origin of the word manage, is to control. But instead, the idea of controlling taken slightly different, which is to say, let's empower. How do we equip, engage, and empower team members? And so that means that managers do need to play a role as a manager from time to time, but they also need to help people grow and develop. So I think of coaching as focused on change, and that's what we're always doing. We're evolving as human beings, and organizations are evolving, teams are evolving, relationships are evolving. And so as we think about that, the role of a manager is to help people to continuously improve their performance. to develop the capability to perform and to experience life's transitions and transformations. And those might include things like moving from one role to another, or moving from one life stage to another, or moving into an organization, or moving out of an organization. In all of these three areas, development, performance, and transformation, are the ways that coaching can be applied. Yeah.
Yeah, so interesting in so many ways that we can take that. Um, but let me suggest two. One is that, this episode is airing. We're deep into the third quarter of 2024. We're celebrating the launch of John Bennett's new book, The Manager's Guide to Coaching for Change. And what I noticed a trend, a pattern several weeks ago where my clients were thinking about the end of 2024. And so what I'm offering, and since for those of you who are hearing this in September, is 3 strategic coaching sessions between now and year end if you need to recharge, to renew. I've sent this message out to my followers, and so just get in touch with me. If you're interested, $1,000, it's really not much at all. And it'll include some additional resources as well. So, John, what I would like to discuss with you in that regard, and I write about this a lot in the upcoming People Dividend Leadership Strategies for Unlocking Potential, is that so often managers, at least the managers I had, some of them, I didn't feel that I was any more than a cog in a wheel.
Mm.
And I don't think they really cared too much.
Yeah.
They were interested in their own careers, their own, and in the absence of complaints, everything was good.
Mm-hmm.
And despite, questions of, well, what else can I update you on? What can I tell? It's always, everything's okay. And yet there are those managers and leaders, for whom we work that you would, I don't know, what's that, like walk through walls, jump through fires, go through hoops, things like that. So I was just reflecting on what you had said about managers. This requires a tremendous amount of care, I think. And I think we have an endemic of like bad managers in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a whole lot of them. What do you think about all of that? I mean, doesn't it require like some caring and kindness to engage in the kind of stuff about being a coach? I don't know.
Yeah, it does. It requires us to move outside of ourselves a bit. And, I would wonder if those managers who are not focused on developing the talent around them are short-sighted, who perhaps they are focused on their own achievement and not advancing that of others. They may actually be more focused on advancing their own careers and not necessarily advancing the mission and purpose of the business. So you gotta have some skin in the game. And I think one of the things and when I talk about this in the book, is that you, as a leader, you need to understand what drives and motivates the people around you. I'm not a proponent that I can motivate you, but I certainly can demotivate you. So I think leaders have to pay attention to what are they doing that's keeping people engaged. And the way to figure that out, and here's for your listeners to be able to take a step when they get back into their office, is if you cannot sit down with a piece of paper and write down for every person with whom you work on a regular basis, what drives them, what are their motivators, you need to figure that out, because that's what keeps people going. And so if you can do that, and if you can sort that out, then you can begin to give feedback based on what's important to the person that's the recipient. You use the Charlie Seashore quote. It's much about feedback is about the giver, not the receiver. And what I'm suggesting is let's turn that upside down. And feedback is often the thing that people long for, they crave, they want to be heard, they want to be cared about, they want to know if they're doing a good job, they want to grow. And so if managers can just pay attention to what are those drivers and then tailor their feedback to those drivers. So I know, for example, Mike, you want to get ahead in your career. Well, my feedback to you ought to be tailored on the things that are going to help you advance your career. Also about what your job is. I mean, there's those basic pieces. But if we could just get managers to start shifting and giving more feedback, doing more listening, and asking some really good questions and not thinking that the manager has to have all the answers, I believe their impact will be increased significantly. So if you want to advance, what better to be known for than somebody who is a talent multiplier as opposed to someone who is a diminisher of the talent around you.
And how do you think this all plays out in the evolving world of work in the United States, at least, with more people working remotely more often, with the advent of the 4-day work week, with the certainly, more of the gig economy? People will have different jobs, different interests, things in which they make money. Where does all of this land? That's certainly something I'm thinking about.
Yeah. Well, I think part of what we have to, and remote work is another, let's add that one in here too. I mean, here we are virtually connected, and none of that takes away from people want to have meaningful contributions to the world around them. I believe that's fundamental to who we are. I think it's also fundamental that we want to be recognized and appreciated for the work that we do. And those two things by themselves open up the possibility of giving feedback, of listening, truly listening to what someone is saying and being curious. And I think one of the things that we've lost in all of that you just described is a curiosity. What is going on with you? How are you doing? What do you need? What are your goals? What are your desires? What is it that can happen for you that will advance you and keep you engaged? Because otherwise, we're perpetuating the churn, right? And I think as it comes to we talk about the remote works environment. I think biggest challenge is not that we need to pull back on remote work as an example, but we got to find new ways of working together. And it doesn't take away from those basics of I want to be cared about. I want to be trusted. I want to be valued. I want to be equipped. I want to be empowered. And I want you to give me some feedback. And all of that ties nicely in with coaching.
I was thinking about Edie Seashore in your remarks, and Edie wrote an article, a brief article. She wasn't a big writer, right? But about what she learned from Doug McGregor, and it's on the topic of how did he become wealthy, or how did he give the appearances of having, a lot of money? And he said that what he did that was true about his practice was that he listened really well.
Mm-hmm.
And then he usually only had like one good idea.
An idea.
It came at the end of an engagement that he would offer.
That's right.
And Edie talked about trying to adapt that
Yes.
philosophy, and that's certainly, what I seek to bring to my practice. And it's hard to, communicate that expertise in podcasts or in other forms about being an effective or a good listener.
Right. And I think you're onto something with that, leaving with some good impact. Mm-hmm. And we don't have to boil the ocean, to use that image. We need to help people have one good takeaway. And in coaching, we talk about ending a coaching conversation by having the person that we're coaching to summarize what they got as insights from the conversation and what are they committed to do. And so when I'm working as an external coach, which I do a lot of that work, is I will always seek one thing that the person can walk away with from an insight perspective, and at least one thing they're willing to do. And again, if we can help people have conversations that lead them not to what I want to do, or want them to do, but what is in their best interest in service of the business objectives, then that's a coaching conversation. And that's using a coaching approach. But when the manager comes in and says, I'm smarter than you and I have all the answers and I'm going to tell you what to do, then you might as well hire a machine. You might as well, to use your image earlier. But if we're hiring humans and if we're engaging with humans, we need to use their full potential.
I think about my clients who are founders in the C-suite executives, or they're C-suite leaders, or they're aspiring to the C-suite. And often, my experience of many of these people is that they are competitive. And it's part of, what we might refer to as creating some dominance in order to make a breakthrough in a market or a noisy organizational environment, or whatever the field is. And in that regard, what do you think works best for coaching in this tradition that you're describing, which I think, connects both of us and arises out of a set of humanistic values, dignity, respect for the individual, belongingness, a value on inclusion, an acknowledgement that people are in process. And what do you think about that with some of the folks that I described?
Well, I would come back to, is it short-term gain or long-term gain? And, dominance in a market is what business is about. That's capitalism. I'm not arguing against capitalism. What I would argue against, though, is dominance over individuals. Okay? There's a difference there, big difference.
I agree. It's such a nice way to put it, John. Power over versus power with.
Yeah, exactly. Just recently, I did a program for a sales organization, and they were trying to, in fact, they called it humanistic selling. And what did I teach them? I taught them coaching skills that could be applied to a sales engagement. But how do you engage with people in a sales environment that's effective, that you're paying attention to the human being, is very similar to coaching. So it wasn't about teaching them a coaching model. It was about teaching them skills for interaction, things like listening, asking powerful questions, reframing, providing feedback, helping to develop a conclusion, building trust. All right. All of these being aware of your own mental models, what you and I would know of as use of self. Because I always say that what we have as leaders, as managers, as human beings interacting, is it starts out with this tool called self. And so we need to understand what that tool is, but we also need to understand how to use that tool. A perfect example for me is I inherited tools from my father and my grandfather. I'm talking about, mechanical tools, saws and hammers.
Hose, rakes, saws, benches.
All of those things, right? I inherited them. And what I didn't inherit was the gene for mechanical skill. My mechanical aptitude is about -10, all right? So I've had these, they've been moved around all over the country. And recently I made a comment about this and I said, I really should get rid of them. And somebody in the group that I was working with came up to me afterward and said, were you serious about getting rid of your tools? I said, yeah, I am. So they came to the house, they loaded them all up and they were delighted. Because what I had to realize was those were tools that I didn't know how to use, and that I was not going to develop the skill, the capacity, or the interest in doing it. And I think about what we do as coaches, as leaders, as managers, is help people realize what those tools are that we have at our disposal and how to use them. and we let go of the things that we can't use, and we outsource that, right?
Yeah,
I've
some people
learned a
pay
long
for the
time ago.
part, some people, and other people like me, we just call someone to fix it.
That's right. I tell people that my best tool is the phone, and I can dial a number and get help.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and that's not true about managing, though.
No, no. We have to face the role that we're in, and I think sometimes we put a pressure on people that the way to get a that you want to get ahead, you have to manage, and I think we need to accept the fact that some people probably are not well suited for that, don't have the interest in it, and that's not the role they need to play. And so often when I work with people and they come to those kind of realizations and they go, I really want to go back to a less complicated life. On the other hand, I work with a lot of people who want to advance their careers, who want to grow their influence, who want to have a bigger impact. And they realize, hopefully, that what they have to do is develop some skills and capabilities uh, to coach others.
John, what should our listeners tell others about the Manager's Guide to Coaching for Change?
Buy it. That's the first thing. Read it. And I think the key takeaways that I would hope that they would get are that number one, coaching is a skill set and a role that they can play as people leaders. Second is that the skills that are outlined here and the process that's outlined can be easily adapted and learned and applied in their day-to-day interactions. And I hope that they will improve their ability to listen, to ask powerful questions, to be curious, and to advance the people around them, because that will lift them up as well.
Well, this has been such a delight for me to discuss with John Bennett, author of The Manager's Guide to Coaching for Change. John, how do people get in touch with you?
A couple of ways. One of the easiest ways is through my website, which is lawton-associates.com. I have a blog that's on there, as well as
John, just before we get to others, Lawton-associates.com.
correct.
That's Lawton. And it's interesting for those of you who aren't in the know about this is that Lawton Associates was the consulting firm that John formed after he left his CEO role at that American Red Cross unit. And his middle name is Lawton. It was his maternal grandmother's maiden name,
You got it.
and thus it has some personal significance. So that's the story between, you try to figure out John Benton, Lawton Associates, how's all that work? And
How's all that
that's
work?
how it
Yep,
works. So,
that's it.
John,
That's it.
so we can find you at Lawton-associates.com.
Yep. That's probably the best way. On LinkedIn, I'm happy to link in with others. And I would encourage people to take advantage of some of the resources that I've listed and posted on website and on LinkedIn, and continue to do that. And certainly I'm a resource for those who want to develop coaching skills or to develop themselves through coaching.
That's so great. So it's been really wonderful to be in conversation with John Bennett. I encourage you to and to celebrate with him the launch of the Manager's Guide to Coaching for Change. I encourage you to pick it up. It's a great read, and will be a good addition to a good long-term addition to your bookshelves, and certainly one of these books that, if you're in people and culture, HR, managing, maybe a book you want to pass along to others as well. So until the next episode of The People Dividend, stay well.